for people listening and tuning in for the very, very first time, the people that may never have seen me before, can you please briefly explain your concept, if you will, about how we speak to the other side? Also, are they ghosts? What are they, and how do we speak to them?
Yeah, let's take this one step at a time. First off, what are they? They are us in purely energetic form. So think of it like this, Corey. Think of your soul as a drop of water, except it's an electromagnetic field. All right, and we know that our body has an electrical field.
Your
Your
soul.
soul.
Now, my soul is speaking to your soul, encased
Yes.
in our bodies.
Right. We're in these meat suits, okay? These physical material world vessels. And so when we die, that drop of water, that electrical field in our brain, the soul, plunges into an eternal sea of consciousness, which is what I call the collective consciousness. You could call it the other side, you could call it heaven, whatever you want to call it, but it literally quantum leaps to this purely energetic state. Now, what that means, though, is that you're still an individual. It's just that you're now energetically linked with all of these other souls. Okay? In other words, we're all cells in the body of God. And so when I'm communicating with spirits, in my book, Evidence of Eternity, I call that the collective consciousness disconnect. And what that means is that, let's say I'm connecting to your Aunt Martha in spirit. Well, she disconnects from the collective consciousness. She's still part of it, but she's adjusting her frequency so that I can communicate with her.
Are you saying it's like a magnet that has a whole bunch of nails on it, and all the nails block the magnet, and then you're just talking to that one nail? Is that what you're saying? Or no?
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I think I'm going to start using that analogy. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Corey.
I'm too much. I feel like the heat miser. Too much. Anyway, but seriously, getting back to your pearls of wisdom. So let's just say, I'm fat and I don't take care of myself and I drop dead. All right. And the Corey that you knew goes, right?
Exactly. But here's the thing. What dies is the body. And the brain is part of the body. So let's say, like I was doing a reading for somebody recently, and her son came through and he was schizophrenic in this world. Well, the spirit's not schizophrenic because schizophrenia is a disease of the brain. So when we die, it's the body, the physicality. The spirit's pure energy. So when he came through, he has the memories and the likes and dislikes, the personality that he did when he was here, but he's free of physical and mental pain. So he was like, Mom, I'm not schizophrenic anymore. I'm at peace. And so he's able to communicate. And to answer the other part of your question, how do they communicate? What a spirit does is when they're interfacing with me or with you, okay, like when a spirit comes in and you have a dream that isn't really a dream, it's a visitation where it's realistic. What's happening is the spirit is emitting a wave of frequency, and their electromagnetic field interfaces with yours, and then that electromagnetic impulse gets converted into recognizable concepts based on your memories, feelings, and cultural associations. And people say, well, that sounds like hocus pocus, but it's really not very different from what you and I are doing when we're just talking to each other. I'm sending an auditory vibrational frequency into that hits your ear, your eardrum vibrates. Okay, so the sound wave energy gets converted into mechanical energy, which is the vibration of your eardrum, which then causes the stapes bone to hit the eighth cranial nerve. So the mechanical energy now gets converted into an electrical impulse when it hits the eighth cranial nerve, which goes into your brain and then gets converted into a recognizable concept. And people say, yeah, but that doesn't sound possible. I mean, how can you talk to a spirit? But let me ask you this. What if I only spoke French and you didn't? you'd be hearing like, yeah, and that would make absolutely no sense until you learned to understand the French language. And it's the same thing with communicating with a spirit, is that you begin to learn how they communicate and what various visions and impulses and sensations mean, and that's how we get information from it. And by the way, I'd like to apologize to all of my friends of French heritage. Pardon-moi, s'il vous plaît. I did not mean to mock your language.
Pepe Le Pew is going to give you hate mail.
Oh, by the way, my book Evidence of Eternity is in French as well. So, yeah, it's in. Yeah, both of my books, Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity, are in several different languages.
Can you please explain the concept of how we speak to them, where the energy goes? Like, for instance, I'm talking to you right now through a satellite.
Right.
That concept.
Well,
because I just want people to understand the reality and how it works.
Okay.
It's not like, is it like Patrick Swayze and Ghost? Could you? You're a scientific guy. Can you explain it, please?
Well, okay. Think of, we use these devices pretty much every day. A cell phone, all right, and it's miraculous technology, and it was inconceivable basically 100 years ago. So let's compare a cell phone call to spirit communication. In a cell phone call, all of a sudden your brain decides that I want to call Corey. So it sends an electromagnetic impulse to my vocal cords, which begin to vibrate, and another impulse to my lungs, which now compress. Contract, and that forces air. So electrical energy becomes muscular energy, and it forces air through my throat, and then my vocal cords vibrating, it turns that air into sound wave energy. The sound wave energy comes out, and then it hits the metal plate in my cell phone, and the sound wave energy then gets converted to mechanical energy, and that mechanical energy then gets converted to an electronic impulse on my phone, which then gets converted into a radio wave energy, which is then emitted to a tower. And so the radio wave energy then hits the radio tower, gets converted into electrical energy, which goes through miles and miles and miles of wires until it goes to a huge antenna. So the electrical energy then gets converted to radio wave energy, which then gets beamed up to a network of satellites. Then when it hits the satellite, it goes from radio wave energy to microwave energy and hits a whole network of satellites until it finds the satellite, which is keyed into Corey's cell phone. And then it converts the microwave energy into radio wave energy, which hits the tower close to you. And the radio tower then converts the radio wave energy to electrical energy, which goes through miles and miles and miles of copper or aluminum wire until it gets to a tower near you, converting the radio wave energy back into electrical energy, and then it gets emitted once again into radio wave energy. Then it hits the antenna in your phone, and the radio wave energy then gets converted into electrical energy, which then causes the speaker in your phone to vibrate, ergo electrical energy getting converted into mechanical energy, then into sound wave energy, which hits your eardrum, which vibrates, and then the sound wave energy turns into mechanical energy, which causes the eighth cranial nerve to send an electronic impulse into your brain, which comes out as, "Hey, Corey." Now, this is all happening at 186,282 miles per second. And this ties into the law of conservation of energy, that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. And the reason that I use that example is that we are now in the 21st century surrounded by all these amazing technological devices which are converting energy from one form to another. So when people say spirit communication is impossible, hello, this was inconceivable a century ago. So we're doing essentially the same thing with spirit communication. A spirit is pure energy, I believe pure electromagnetic energy, and the spirit emits a wave of frequency, and that electrical impulse goes into my brain, and then my brain converts it into recognizable concepts based on my memories, feelings, and cultural associations. And so that is how spirit communication essentially works.
Thank you. Now, I have another question. Everybody says to me, 666, Satan, aren't you worried about demonic possessions and ghosts and things that go bump in the night and you know?
Yeah, 666 is the number in the book of Revelations, and it references the Antichrist and says that it shall have a number, the mark of the beast, and that number is 666. Well, let's look at the book of Revelations written by the Apostle John. He lived in the 1st century AD, and they talk about the Antichrist. Well, the early Christians, when they went on their mission, and Paul went to Rome and other apostles went to Rome, and initially they would make contact with the Jewish communities there, and they would preach. And so in Rome and throughout the Roman Empire, the missionaries, they used to have their own code, and they would use the Hebrew alphabet, and each number and each word in the Hebrew alphabet would have a number. And Nero Caesar, his number was 666. So when they were talking about the Antichrist, they were talking about Nero. Now, for those of you who know who Nero was, he was a psychopathic Roman emperor who became emperor in his 20s, given absolute power of life and death over everybody in the world. On top of that, he was a narcissist, a sociopath, a sexual pervert, and he used to have Christians.
Say that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah, well, but the people liked him because he put on these big theatrical displays, and he spent a lot of money on public entertainment. But he also started accusing people of being Christians, so that he could seize their property, and then he'd have them burned alive, thrown to lions and other wild animals in the arena, basically having people murdered for his pleasure. And the assault that he engaged upon the Christians was just brutal. Now, there's other facets to that as well, because they talk about the image of the beast, and no one could buy or sell without the number of the beast. So in the Hebrew religion, the depiction of a person, especially one given deity-like status, was considered blasphemy, so it wasn't done. And the people at the time had to use Roman coins, which had Nero's image on it. Now let's look at this from a practical standpoint. Talk about the Antichrist. There's a lot of people, the Antichrist. Well, who do you think the early Christians, the ones who put together the Bible, were afraid of? Some nebulous, mystical, mysterious figure thousands of years in the future, or the psychopathic Roman emperor who was having them burned alive and fed to wild animals? Let me ask you, who do you think they thought the Antichrist was?
Exactly. Oh, you're asking me?
No, that's the question we're leaving for people to.
Right, exactly.
So exactly, and so 666 has been considered. Has become synonymous with the devil. Also, back in, I guess it was the 70s, there was a novel that came out that got made into a movie, and they actually did a remake, The Omen. And the guy who wrote the book talked about this little kid that had a birthmark on his head that was 666, and he turned out to be the son of Satan and all that. But and the sequels ended up making what's his name from Jurassic Park? Neil, you know what I'm talking about. Sam Neill, because Sam Neill in one of the, I think the third installment of the Omen series was the young Antichrist. So if anything good came out of all that, it made Sam Neill a big star because he saved the day in Jurassic Park.
What about, well, let me just ask you, is there Satan? Can you get demonically possessed? You were called to an exorcism once.
Okay. Answer the second question first. All right. Yes, I did go to an exorcism once. I was in the Amazon on a photographic expedition, and it was really cool because we're on this exploratory vessel, It was like a big clunkety clunkety giant version of a tugboat with about a dozen crew and a dozen passengers. And we were chugging up the Ucayali River, which is a tributary of the Amazon in Peru, because the Amazon's headwaters are in Peru. And we came upon this village, and as we were coming up to the village, all these canoes came up, and the natives, the locals, said that El Brujo was in the village, and El Brujo means the witch doctor.
Yeah.
And El Brujo had summoned us and invited us to see the exorcism he was going to perform. And it was really cool because not all the passengers wanted to go. There was only about, I think, 5 of us. I was one of them. This surgeon and his wife, this orthopedic surgeon and his wife, and this botanist, and there was this German student. And so we take the skiff from the name of our vessel was La Esmeralda, and so we go into this village. No running water, no electricity. It's just grass huts. And I'm expecting El Brujo to have chicken bones in his nose and all this, but he's not. He's wearing a T-shirt and wearing a baseball cap, But this place was pretty much as primitive as it gets. And so we walk into this hut, and there's this woman. She was laying face down on the ground. It looked like her husband was with her because he was calming her, and her mother was there, and there was a little fire. And El Brujo was explaining to our guide, and they were speaking Aymara, and they would speak Aymara to our guide, who would then translate to English. And he said that demons have possessed this woman's body and that he was going to cast the demons out. And he looked at me and said, "Welcome, talks to ghosts." And it was like, well, how did they know about me? Well, apparently gossip moves as fast in the Amazon as it does anywhere else, because we were in a couple villages up the river the day before, and it got around, and because the Amazonians are very respectful of mediums. And so he starts pouring all these liquids. He had all these little bottles with liquids, and he gooey and all this. And he starts licking them off her back, and he's like spitting this gelatinous substance, and he's explaining to our guide. Okay, so it's like we were like at Harvard Medical School, and he's explaining everything step by step, and our guide's doing this, and then he says, "I will cast the demons into the fire," and he throws it in there. And it's funny because the orthopedic surgeon's wife, it was funny, we were calling them Thurston and Lovey. She's like, "Oh, this is just," And the surgeon leans over to me and he goes, "Mark," he goes, "this woman isn't possessed. She's got a herniated disc." He said, "I've seen this thousands of times. I've operated on them thousands of times." And it made sense because these people don't understand herniated discs. All they know is that you look at this woman, she looks perfectly healthy, but there's this pain they can't understand. Okay. And then El Brujo looks up at me and says something in Aymara, and the guide translates, and he said, "Have the demons been cast out?" Okay, we're in this Amazon village in a hut. There's 100 of the locals, okay, and they're all listening through there, and it's getting dark, okay? And the last thing I need to do is to offend anyone. And the botanist sitting next to me, she's smiling, and she goes, "Mark, don't this up," and everyone's looking at me, and I said, "There are no demons here." And they're like, "Oh, okay." So the locals were happy. And then he said, "I will prevent the demons from returning." And I hear the botanist go, "He can't be serious." He pulled out this looked like a weed. And I go, "Well, what is that?" She goes, "It's the Amazonian version of poison ivy." And he starts whipping this woman's back, and literally, Corey, we can see the welts forming on her back, and she's screaming, and he's explaining she will feel better in a week. And the surgeon says, "Well, of course she'll feel better in a week. She couldn't possibly feel worse than she's going to feel right tonight, And what we figured out was that the herniated disc will still be there, but when the welts from the poison ivy subsided, she'd feel better, but not really intact. And so, we thanked them for inviting us, and I was getting kind of nervous because, look, there was no electric lights except for on our boat for
Right.
at least 200 miles in any direction. Okay, we were literally as isolated as it gets, and we got back to the boat, and we were discussing this, that these people fear something they can't understand, so they convert it into a demon, and the witch doctor was casting the demon out.
Now, you've done readings for me, and I've seen you firsthand communicate. Can a devil come into you? Is there a Satan? Can you get possessed? Can there really be a real exorcism? Can Satan really do everything that Hollywood says he could do?
Well, hey, everything Hollywood says.
Exist.
Certainly there's people who disagree with me, but I do not believe in a devil. Certainly not in the archetypal sense of the guy with the, pointed the horns and the pitchfork sticking in the butt and saying do bad things and all that. I don't think human beings need a demonic entity to make them do evil things. I think that the devil exists in the form of the human ego, edging God out, ego, because whenever you do something horrible, unkind, rude, hurtful to another person, you're only thinking of yourself. You're not taking that other person's feelings into account. You're not acting out of love. You're acting out of sheer self-centeredness. So as far as the devil as a James Bond villain with his, a central command of evil, I think that's nothing more than primitive, superstitious, mythological nonsense.
So all of the spirits that you've ever spoken to, because I know that you've seen ugly things, bad energies, like when you went to Auschwitz and you went to different places where there were murders and things and mass murders, but none of these spirits have ever communicated to you Satan.
No. And like I said, there are certainly mediums who disagree with me.
I'm talking about you.
Yeah, no, I in the 15,000 readings that I've done, I've never met a demon, a devil, and people say, oh well, when you're doing a reading, it's just a demon impersonating your loved one, right? They're coming to impersonate your loved one to let you know that the afterlife exists. They're happy, they're at peace, they're reconciling, they bring messages of love, healing, and resolution. Darn, that sure sounds satanic to me.
What you're telling me is all of the spirits, well, the souls that when a soul transitions, there is no heaven, there is no hell. They're basically here on this plane in a different frequency. Is that accurate?
Yes and no. They're in a different dimension that runs parallel to this one. So they're here, but they're not here. Okay.
What's it look like?
It would be very difficult, if not impossible, for you and I to even begin to understand it. So think of it like this. We live in AM radio. They live in FM radio. They're at a higher frequency. And our frequency is slower. And so there are times when the two frequencies intersect and there's an alignment. And that's spirit communication. We say, well, what does it look like? You and I can't understand what it's like to live as a pure energetic being. And I've asked them, what's it like? And they're basically said it's wonderful, it's great, they can be all over the place. And it appears that there are levels to the other side. So like the higher frequencies would be what you and I might call heaven. The lower frequencies, I don't think so much as hell, because it's not a static state. But I've done a number of readings where murderers, serial killers even have come through, and they're on a much different frequency than the victims who, they're victims who also come through. So So let's say like a serial killer is on a lower frequency and the victim's on a higher frequency. The sense of hell is that the person on the lower frequency can't go to the higher frequency, but the person on the higher frequency can go to the lower frequency if they want to. And so the spirit that's in the lower frequency eventually can work themselves out of it because they're not evil on the other side, and they can make reconciliation, or they come back into our world through reincarnation. There are people who seem to be convinced that, oh, I'm haunted. Not me, but they feel that they're haunted. I've never seen any evidence of that. I think you got to realize you're the one in control, not them. You determine the parameters of the spiritual contact. If you don't want a spirit around you, tell them I don't want you around you. Invoke the white light of the divine power, God, through prayer, through positive affirmations, and reflect the negativity away. But can they communicate with you by electrical, like, for example, they can disrupt electrical fields. They can make lights blink, doorbells go off. I've seen instances where things have moved. So yeah, they're capable of doing things like that. But usually the way they're going to communicate with us is by making their presence felt, by coming to you in the sleep state. So like when you're dreaming, you'll have a visitation. But as far as making your life a quote unquote living hell, I do not believe that. No, nightmares are dreams. A visitation has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it feels real. It feels like you sat down and had a conversation with that person. That's the difference. And when you've had that type of contact, you'll know the difference between that and the surrealism of a dream.
You can follow Mark on Instagram at Psychic Lawyer Mark Anthony. And Mark's official website is The Afterlife Frequency, which is coincidentally the title of Mark's upcoming book. You can also find Mark's other two great books, Evidence of Eternity and Never Letting Go. If you're interested in scheduling a reading with Mark, I've got one from the guy, and all I could say is, he's dead on.